Okay, so let's talk a little bit about career ladder problems. I don't know what you've noticed about career ladders, but I have noticed HR thinks, and a lot of managers think, they only go in one direction, which is up. But I suspect that many people have careers like I did. I first started off as a software developer. I added project management informally and then more formally. Then I went to a different company in the Boston area. They said, "You're too stupid to be a developer," because that was symbolics. That was about the Lisp machine. And I did not know Lisp at that time. So while I was learning how to program in Lisp, they made me an offer as a tester. That was actually a very interesting job. If you have ever tried to test a collector or the scheduler in an operating system, that's what I was supposed to test. So of course I wrote code, which looked a lot like Fortran. Fine. And then as a tester, I took on project management responsibilities. Then I became a project manager. Then I became a program manager. Then I became a manager. And then after my second child was born, I went back to test automation. So I was a developer working in test. Then I became a manager again and a director and, blah, blah, blah. So I have had one of these wacko kind of careers. I suspect most of you have had a similar experience. And what I see a lot in organizations is that very few of them have effective parallel tracks. That how do you move into, we were called project managers at the time.
Contato una charla.
You you would call us more scrum masters or
Vale.
facilitative project managers. And so I think it's really important to say, what do we want from our careers? How do we make more money? Because we do take on more responsibility, but how do we not just become managers, right? And any career ladder based on personal deliverables, what I achieve as a person, is insufficient for a team-based approach to organizations. So this is Agile Reloaded. I am sure that you folks are all really trying to work in teams, in Agile teams. So this is really an issue for Agile organizations. This is a very simplified career ladder. And notice all of this is about personal deliverables. And if you think about the various levels, you can see that while there might be at level 3 some fair amount of seniority across all the levels, by the time you get to level 4, what I'm calling principal engineer or technical lead, and some kind of maybe a program manager or a group manager or director, and maybe I don't have these exactly right, but you can see that there are many, many fewer principal engineers, consulting engineers, and certainly a CTO. Whereas there are many, many, many more opportunities for people to experience some kind of greater responsibility. So if you want more money even in an agile organization, you probably have to take on a more of a management role. I don't think that that's so useful. Now, let me talk about Luhmann's equation before we talk about the rest of this stuff. Luhmann's equation says every person's behavior, that's the big B, is a function of the person in their environment. And if you think about performance problems that you've seen in organizations, you can say, I bet that's how the team works, right? If you've ever seen somebody work as a solo person, everybody else is working solo. How safe do people feel to discuss either their technical or interpersonal concerns and challenges? What is the physical location for the team? So this is a very interesting question now that a lot of organizations are saying, let's go back to work. Maybe not so much in Europe. Certainly here in the US, where we have vaccines, many people have gotten vaccinated. A lot of my clients are saying, everybody back to work. I don't think that that's a really good idea. So there's all kinds of stuff about the environment, and that includes trust and organizational policies. So when I think about how well we perceive people to work, that's the behavior thing. We have to think about the function of the person and their environment. So when we have only this dual track, we have two losses, right? You promote a great technical person to be a manager, and the team loses a wonderful technical person. And if the person does not want management, then you have a horrible manager. I mean, you have the worst of all possible worlds. So, what I find is that so few people realize management is a total career change, right? You can do more work as you're practicing your management, but if you don't want to focus on management of some sort, if you want to focus on more technical work, you will have to make a decision about what to do about those management ideas that you have. So let me talk a little bit about personal deliverables. I would say that if you really have an agile team, nobody works alone on any product. Well, even if you don't have an agile team, nobody works alone on any product. So notice this is my general agile picture from some of my books, that you have a cross-functional team at the core of this picture. So look at everything the team does. It's all about the team. We focus on the team in agility. So that's why it's so important to really think about, how do we reconcile personal deliverables with an agile team and our career letters? I would say it's not really possible. So when I think about solo achievements, I think about how they ignore the agile system of work. When we have an agile system of work, it's all about the various feedback loops. So there are feedback loops inside the team itself. There are feedback loops for the system in the organization. Let me talk about this picture just a little bit. When a project starts, you create an initial project backlog as the team completes work either in flow on a daily basis, maybe once every 1 or 2 weeks. If you work in iteration, then you update the backlog. So there's this greater feedback loop. When the team starts working on the backlog and demos, there's feedback to the backlog. And when the team releases to customers and gets feedback from the customers, there's also more feedback, right? Back to the backlog, to the team, to the process of the team. So there are a whole bunch of feedback loops in here that I just barely talked about. So the more the team works together, learns together, and the shorter the feedback loops, the faster the team can deliver useful work and learn. And that means that, notice I said before that this is all about the team. The team is at the heart of any agile approach. And the more the team reduces its feedback loops, the duration of the feedback loops, the faster, well, I should say, the more the team works in flow efficiency. Let me talk a little bit about flow efficiency and feedback loops. So a lot of you still work in organizations, and your career ladders reinforce this, where you're supposed to work on your thing by yourself, hand it off to the next person. They work on their thing by themselves, hand it off to the next person. They work on their thing by themselves, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's a whole bunch of problems with resource efficiency, right? You don't, every single one of these arrows is an opportunity for a delay, and you finally get to finish work. But when you work in flow efficiency, when the team works together, they finish as fast as possible, they learn faster, and the piece for career ladders, you cannot tell who does what. You just cannot tell. So how do we recognize people for their achievements if we really have a team-based approach to work? So I'm going to ask you in the chat to say something about this. How does your team work now? Does your team work as individuals, full resource efficiency? Maybe you have sub teams inside the team or as an entire team in flow efficiency. And do you ever need people from the outside, which is also an example of flow efficiency? So please put in the chat, how do you work in resource efficiency or flow efficiency? And I am not judging you because many organizations still work in resource efficiency. I don't see anything in the chat as sub-teams. That's good. So that means you might pair or triad, maybe even mob as a sub-team. I hope that some of you say more about this. Company is resource efficiency, but team is flow efficiency. Oh, flow efficiency. You used to work in resource efficiency, but releases took too long. Yes. Yes, my experience also. Entire team is an example of flow efficiency. And most of my teams are resource, but there are some that are flow, mostly flow efficiency. People have their niches of expertise though. So there's a real mix. The more your team can work in flow efficiency, the easier it will be to change to a different kind of a career ladder. And of course, how your team works now reflects the culture of your organization. So let me talk about the 3 pieces of culture. What people can discuss, absolutely. How people treat each other, and what the organization rewards. And the career ladder, and especially if HR creates the reward system, that's all about the how HR feels about flow efficiency or resource efficiency. I'll just walk through this quickly. Let's assume that people work as individuals in resource efficiency. So this is a value stream map. Sam works on a story alone. He asks for code review. That's after 4 hours. Dan is not available for another couple of hours. That's the red wait time here. Dan finds some problems. They work together. That's great. Then they have to wait for a tester. Cindy finds some problems. Sam and Cindy fix the code and test. Great that they're working together. Now the product owner is not available. Finally, the PO reviews and marks the work is done, right? So their cycle time was 8.25 hours plus 10 hours of waiting time. So their cycle time is 18.25 hours. All that 10 hours of wait time, you might not be able to ever remove it. But the more you work in flow efficiency, the less wait time you have. And so Philip has a very interesting comment. Some team members who lost their former role during our agile transformation tend to push our mode back to resource efficiency. That's because they are finding their way. The reward system is not congruent with the way you want things to work. Remember Lewin's equation? That behavior is a function of the person's performance in the environment. The reward system is part of the environment. So if you have more of a typical Agile team, you might have only 5.5 hours of work time, everything above the line. And wait time is only 4 hours. Even then, you still have a cycle time, but at least your work time is greater than your wait time, as opposed to the other way around. So I would like us to think about changing our language a little bit. I am trying to talk about team members, not individual contributors, and people, not resources, because we are all quite resourceful people. And when we can move the culture of the organization to a more team-oriented approach, including our management cohorts, we are much more likely to be able to work in flow efficiency and create a career ladder that makes more sense. So let's talk about how all the several purposes career ladders serve. You might need to know when and where to hire a person into the organization. If you have a useful career ladder, you might say, no, we have all these people in senior positions. We need to hire people who are more junior, who are less seasoned. So that where to hire a person in the various levels, that makes a total sense. How do we know when to promote somebody? Not just because we like Johanna's smile, but because Johanna has somehow served the team, served the product, served the organization. And notice I talked about serving in a variety of ways, not accomplishing. And when we have career ladders, we can create criteria for the behaviors we want to reinforce and reduce. So I think that there are several kinds of, I think of these as kind of agile behaviors, but they are more team-based behaviors. So I like to think about collaboration, feedback and coaching, ability to ask for help, experimentation, adaptability, influence, not coercion, influence. So I want to have a reinforcing feedback loop that over time, the behaviors we want to reinforce create more and more useful work. I think that these behaviors do. Now, I would also like to ask you in the chat to consider which behaviors we want more or less of. I put in these more of in this left-hand column. I added less of in this left middle column where we have heroics, know-it-all. Oh yeah, I'm never a know-it-all. I am. It's not one of my more pleasant behaviors. Working solo, inflicting help. And then when I did this the last time, people said to me, we want more listening in our teams. We want people to listen better. And then are there any other less ofs? So what other kinds of less of or more of would you like to see? And please put that in the chat. I would like to see what you're thinking about. Any more of behaviors or less of behaviors? Well, how about if unlearning or open to change? I really like that. Thank you, Jean, sharing ideas. Oh, more empathy. Yeah. Okay. See, I need to add I need to add all this stuff to these slides. Thank you. Less of command and control. Yeah. Especially from top down. Vulnerability is an interesting thing for more of. I find that when I'm more vulnerable by asking for help, admitting when I don't know, that's that unlearning and open to change business. That kind of vulnerability really works well in the organization. And when I am vulnerable, trying to ask for sympathy, that does not work all that well. So I feel a blog post coming on this business of sympathy versus empathy with others, right? The two are very, very different. When I look for sympathy, I'm looking for pity. When I look for empathy, I look for understanding. And that difference of empathy and Aislinn, that understanding for other people, extending empathy, that's a really big deal. Thank you. So this is a simplified agile career ladder where I talk about and notice that this is about influence, not about achievements. So I think that there's team and product-based influence on this left side, product-focused influence across the team and the organization, and culture-based influence all the way on the right. Because the people who can change the culture have to be able to change the reward system. Right? That's a big piece of it. So let me tear this apart a little. Oh, let me talk a little bit about the technical ladder. That's this one, the product focused ladder and the culture focused ladder. So I expect in a technical ladder that people would talk about code and product across the team, extending out to the organization with solutions-based domain expertise. The product focused ladder is facilitating teams either directly or through the product. And you can see where an architect might straddle some of these. And people leadership is all about industry and customer expertise and focusing on the culture you want more of. When we clarify these various areas of leadership and influence, we can create a jungle gym where people can really move back and forth and sideways and up and down. Here's how I think of this. Let me see if I can give you, let me talk some more about this. So when I think about code-based leadership or technical leadership, I think about the various engineering. I'm calling these engineers. You might have members of the technical staff. You might have developers. You might have testers. You might have BAs, right? Because BAs might actually be in the code and the design also, not just in product focused leadership. So there's that. Where do we put the BAs? I have no idea, right? I would love it if there are any BAs on here to tell me where you think you live. You might live more in product focused leadership, but I've certainly seen BAs and product owners who have a lot of architecture based leadership. So I really like to think about where do we want to start moving across the organization. And I often find it's in this level, the senior engineer level. When I first told you about my initial project management experience, I was a senior engineer at a small company, and we did not have product managers, we did not have BAs, we had engineers, and some of us took on product leadership at the same time as we did our engineering. So I would spend half a morning talking to the marketing people, talking to the hardware people, and then building what we now called a product backlog. And was I really a BA product manager? No. I was focused on getting this product out the door, but my real leadership was in organizing all of the efforts we needed to do to make this product ship. So I did things in the organization, not because I wanted to exert product based influence, but because I wanted to exert project based influence so we could ship this product. This is back in the 80s where we actually had very few specialists the way we have now. And what I found at that time, we were all much more able to flex to produce the outcomes that we wanted. So the outcomes for code-based leadership is all about what do we do? What can the code and the technical work do? How much influence do I need with other people to actually create this leadership, right? And get the outcomes that we want. Same with the product focused leadership. Same with the people based leadership. So we have this term in our industry called technical leaders, and it's not the same anywhere, right? Everybody has their own definition of technical leadership. So I'm saying that a technical lead does all of the feedback and coaching on technical issues, um, feedback and coaching on interpersonal issues, obtaining hard resources for the team, especially such as lab space and computers, assisting the team with its ability to become self-organizing, and leading the hiring effort. Not anything about the performance evaluation or managing the project portfolio. Some technical leaders do address some of this project portfolio business, but they mostly stay here in these areas. And now what's really interesting to me is that technical leaders really work through influence. So while I think about code-based leadership as the primary way we might see technical leaders, we also might see product-based technical leaders, right? That might happen, especially if you're a BA. So I've been talking about influence. What the heck do I mean? I really like Jeannie Laborde's Influencing with Integrity. It's a bad cover. It's fine. The book is really interesting. Jeannie Laborde says we need to show our competence, we need to show our trustworthiness, and we need to build small wins every day so that we reinforce this notion of our competence and trustworthiness. Without competence and trustworthiness, we don't even have the start of influence. We can do this as teams. We don't have to be competent alone. We don't have to be trustworthy alone. We can be trustworthy as a team. We can be competent as a team. So we can express our expertise as outcomes. And then when we build rapport every single day, hopefully with the people we want to influence, we can base our influence on mutually agreeable outcomes. What do we want for the short term? What do we want for the long term? So I bet you have seen organizations where people influence the product managers. And I'm not sure who would influence the product managers. I've seen scrum masters, I've seen project managers, I've seen BA, I've seen various technical leaders. I'll say, if we just could finish a whole bunch of aggravating, irritating problems in the code, we would have a much better time with our customers and we would make it easier for ourselves to do this kind of work, right? The team would be easier if we just fixed a whole bunch of issues 1 through 20. 1 through 20 won't take us so long time, but right now they irritate everybody. I just learned a new word for this. It's called paper cuts. I had no idea. So I hope that that's not a particular thing on Twitter. I hope that I am not spending way too much time on Twitter. But I find that this notion of paper cuts in the product really helps me articulate why this is a problem for me, for the organization, for everything. So influence, if you think about mutually agreeable outcomes and short and long-term objectives, you can say the short-term objectives is to clean up things that we did not know that we needed to clean up before. Now, after we do that, we are happy to go on to that large feature set. So when I think about code and product-based influence, I think about these circles. This is from, oh, Stephen Covey. Yes, for a minute I lost him. That he says we have a circle of control, then we have a circle of influence, finally we have a circle of concern. So if I relate that to COVID, we have a circle of concern for the entire world, right? Because as long as anybody has COVID and no vaccines, we're all in big, big trouble. We have circles of influence with our families, with our teammates, with our friends, in our own communities. And we have a circle of control for what we do for ourselves. So we always have control over ourselves. That's a huge, huge thing. And then we have to think about where else do we have various levels of influence. I have noticed that the more we collaborate with others, the more we expand our influence. So you might not think of it that way, but the more collaboration and the more trustworthiness and competence we show, the more influence we have, which is why it's useful for us to ask the question, how do we work inside our team? How do we work across teams? How do we work across the organization? So here's what technical influence might look like. So I really like to say, I'm assuming that we're collaborating inside the team, either as sub-teams or as a total team. You might want to model asking for help in experimentation. Inside the team is a technical lead, and the architect would be across the entire organization, all that stuff. Now, think about what that means for team influence. So, if I think about technical influence, the least seasoned you are, the least influence you have. But as an engineer, and yes, I'm using engineer words, you certainly have influence, maybe with your peers, and definitely over your own code. You might have some product based influence. As a senior person, you might have influence across the entire team for the code base, for the tools, for the test architecture. You might have some product influence. And we certainly, how we treat each other is a piece of the culture, even for technical influence. I will tell you a story about my experience. Back when I was an engineer, many, many, many years ago, we used to talk about brain dead code and brain dead tests. We freely used that language. I would not use that language anymore. Yes, it was very politically incorrect, and we did not mean that each other was brain dead. We use it as an expression of description for the code or the test. So I would change that now. If I think about this principal engineer or technical lead, the team influence is across the entire code and tests, maybe extending to more teams, and certainly with the product owner and maybe the project manager if you're in a program. And then what's the consulting engineer? Across the team influence is across the entire code and test space and anything in the product and across the entire product. And the CTO is across a significant or the entire part of the organization and across the entire product base. So even though I'm saying this is technical influence, there are still product and culture influences included in technical influence. I hope that you tell me if I missed anything for influence. Now, for product based influence, I'm not sure that you can have any real influence while you're even as an engineer alone. With the entire team, yes. So I really like to think about product-based influences, how to support the team's collaboration, how the teams work, how you can influence the way the team and the product and the organization uses an agile approach, and problem space domain expertise. So problem space is understanding the problems you want to solve as opposed to solution space back here, which is how you solve the problems. Okay. So again, the more influence we have, the higher the level of title, the more influence you have across multiple teams, across the code base, across multiple products, across the entire organization. So I think much more about facilitating the team, how the team affects the product, how the product might change, how we deal with customers, all that stuff. Now, people-based influence is a little bit different, and I'm not sure you're going to have a lot of people-based influence, except for how we treat each other, right, in your teams, until you have some kind of a management level. And a manager often influences at least one team, but possibly multiple teams, especially if the managers get together as cohorts. So, one of the things I wrote about in Modern Management Made Easy is I'm a huge fan of management based cohorts because we talk about product teams and feature teams. We talk about the senior leadership team. What happens to all those managers in the middle? The more you have cohorts of managers who work together, the more people-based influence you can have in the organization. That's again what people can discuss, how people treat each other, what the organization rewards. You might need guidelines and constraints for people's actions and who has the power to make decisions, I should say. So I expect that people managers, people who use people-based influence, understand the industry that the organization plays in and can affect the strategy. Can a first line manager affect the strategy? Maybe not that much, but certainly once you get to a director level, yes, you can and you should. So again, the more people-based influence you have, the more you have product influence across one product, across a product line, and across multiple product lines. So this leadership business influences the circles. I find that when I really exert my leadership, regardless of whether or not it's technical, product, or cultural, my circles collapse. Or I should say, maybe my circle of control expands, my circle of influence expands, right? I have much more influence with other people. And the leadership defines and refines that culture. So I really like to think about why influence for this business of career ladders. The more we use our influence, the more we have to build rapport with other people. So I bet you've seen people who proudly wear t-shirts that say, does not play well with others. But that does not work in an agile organization. We need people who do play well with others. We need to still show our own competence, especially if we're still working in resource efficiency. But we can show our own competence in resource efficiency or in flow efficiency by working together. And if we achieve shared goals and achievements, that's how the common purpose for influence can really, really work. So I really like to think about encouraging people to move across this various ladder. If I look back on my career, I was a senior engineer. Well, first I was just an engineer when I did that project management and maybe a little product management work. So I was at this level, but I was very close to being a senior engineer. And as a senior engineer, I was quite capable of moving into project management work and moving back. I could be a scrum master or move back. I could be a product owner, maybe not as good a product owner if I had started off as a BA, but I could do that. Or a facilitative leader, I could move back. I actually moved into management from project management. And notice I said after my second daughter was born, I moved back. I had been a group manager and a director, but I was not ready for principal engineer work at that time. I moved back to being a senior engineer. And I found that for me, my various movements really helped me create empathy with other people. Let me just tell you this one story. I was a director in a 100-person organization that had just moved from being a 150-person organization down to 100. Yes, we laid 50 people off, including the original manager, the original director for that organization. I moved over from being the director of SQA and continuing engineering, being the software development director. They got rid of the previous software development director. So now I'm moving at this director level. One of the guys who was a senior engineer, who was actually a really smart guy, said to me, I don't believe in managers. I don't think we need managers. I said, well, I really believe in facilitative managers who can help get things done, not command and control. I agree with you about that. He said, no, we don't need any managers at all. I said, well, would you like to test that? He said, sure. I said, would you like to have a month where your team has no manager? He said, you would do that? I said, it's a month. What have we got to lose? We're all in chaos now. What's wrong with a little more chaos? He said, okay, I'll do that. So I offered this to the people on his team. And they all said, yes, we don't need no stinking managers. We are fine without managers. They gave me such an earful. It was actually very, very funny. So I said, fine, here are the achievements I want, the outcomes I need from you over this next month. I will check in with you on a weekly basis. I want you to show me, I want you to demo your work to me so I know that you're finishing work. Oh, no problem, Johanna. No problem at all. Week 1, demo, disaster. Week 2, demo, disaster. I said, it's 2 weeks now. We need to do something different. I need you to figure out how you are going to work because each of you was working alone and I need you to work together to achieve these outcomes. No, don't worry, Johanna. We got this. Every time I hear we got this, I get a little sinking feeling in my stomach. So I said, fine. Remember, the end of this experiment is at 1 month. You have half the time remaining. Week 3 demo, disaster. Week 4, disaster. I said, okay, people, we need something. What do you want to do? Because you are not achieving the outcomes you need to achieve. They said, but we only need 1 more week. I said, no, you don't have another week. You need to do something different now. So this one engineer said, I really hate management. What if I become the manager and I help you all get everything together? I kind of smiled and managed not to say anything because that was the whole idea behind the management I wanted these people to have. Fine, totally fine. So I said, okay, how would that work for all of you? Grumble, grumble, grumble. Fine. This one guy became a manager. I said, okay, how will you work with people to make sure they finish their work so you can demo something to me next week? Because now we are behind, right? I really thought that you would get something done in these 4 weeks. Well, let us talk about it and get back to you. I said, okay, I want an answer tomorrow about how you're going to change. And by the way, my weekly staff meeting is this day at this time. I will invite you to all of those meetings. Okay, fine. So they all got together and they realized that they did not need management, they needed facilitation. Fine. They needed also help with feedback and coaching because nobody was offering each other feedback and coaching. So I worked with the engineer who was going to be the quote manager, and I gave him the crash course and how to offer feedback, how to offer coaching. I asked, do you want me to train people in your team? No, no, no. We can do it all by ourselves. Let me finish the story. It took them another month to finish the work that they had anticipated they could finish in the first month. And everybody had a brand new appreciation for how management can kind of grease the skids, right? Facilitate the team, make it possible for the team members to do their work. Not command and control, but facilitation. After that last month, that second month of work, the engineer came to me and said, management is way too hard. I don't want to do it anymore. I want you to choose somebody else. So I went to the team. Does anybody want to do this management stuff? No, no, no. It's way too hard. We want to focus on the work. So in effect, everybody in the team had kind of moved across the ladders and then moved back. And I hired a new manager from outside the organization, but the team was in on the decisions, in on the hiring, in on the decisions. They worked kind of happily ever after for 18 months, and then I lost track of what they were doing. So management can really help people, but it's not so much that you have just technical work and just management work, but there's all this other influence that you need across the organization. So I would like you to consider these possibilities. I really like this business of 3 tracks in a ladder, not 2. And if you can move from up thinking to overthinking, right? How do you move laterally, not just vertically? And how does this person help support, facilitate, serve other people? And is it mostly in the team? Is it mostly in the product? Is it mostly in the organization? Who would you need to talk to first to even consider this in your organization. So I hope that you stay in touch with me. If you want to read more about how to make a more humane organization, the Modern Management Made Easy books, The Practical Ways to Manage Yourself, Practical Ways to Lead and Serve Others, Practical Ways to Lead an Innovative Organization. This material comes from those. The hiring book, also partly affiliated with this. I have a blog series, but the images in that blog series are not the same as the images here. I need to write another blog series with these images. So I hope that you subscribe to my newsletter, and I hope that you decide to link with me on LinkedIn. I'm going to stop the share. And what questions do you have of me now? You can come off of mute if you would like. Did I blow everybody's mind?
Hey, this is Ashlyn here. I was just going to ask you, what's some of the best advice you've got in your career? What do you think would be some of the best advice you'd want to share?
Oh, Ashlyn, I'm so sorry for mispronouncing your name before.
No problem. It's Irish, so don't worry about it. I don't expect you to be able to pronounce it, so don't worry.
Thank you. Thank you very much. The best advice I got in my career was to manage myself. I get very excited and excitable. Those of you who've seen me present before have seen this excitement, and sometimes it's very useful and sometimes maybe not so useful. So I find that when I think about my self-management, I can then serve the rest of my team and others, and I am a better person. So that's me. As a manager, the best advice I got was do one-on-ones regularly. Make sure you never skip a one-on-one.
Thank you. That's great advice to manage yourself. Perfect.
Yeah.
Hi, Johanna. This is Manolo. I have a question. You mentioned that you encourage the people to move across the organization. So, how to do that? Because according to my experience, it's difficult, no? So the technical people move to management, but they stay there forever. At least in Spain, no? It's very difficult to. they move, but just one movement.
So I think that that's true worldwide, right? That's and if they want to do management, that's fine. But if they don't want to do management, that's the problem. So if they still find the need to keep their fingers in the code, that's a really big deal because management is a new job. The skills you need for management are not the skills you need for code or test or product or any of that stuff. So I really like to ask people, what do they want to do? And this is if they want to do the technical work, but they feel they must get the raise that comes from a management job, that's why we need multiple career ladders. Right? That's exactly the reason. So yeah, so I think that when Manu publishes the video, maybe get your HR people to look at it and say, what could we do differently so that technical people want to stay technical and still get paid for it, whereas move to management only if they want to move to management. Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, it's not just Spain.
We also talk about the Peter principle, no? That says that everyone.
Well, I kind of wonder if the Peter principle is even a greater extension of this, right? I had forgotten about the Peter principle when I did all these blog posts, and people reminded me and said, "Oh, yeah, that's exactly the problem."
The problem.
Yeah. Well, especially if you don't want to learn how to manage, right? Because then you bump up against your capabilities very, very fast. Yeah. Other questions or other comments?
Yeah, I have a question. So, what do you think of sometimes I've seen in some organization there are lateral movement. I'm just making example. Delivery manager that is interested in moving into product management, and they do that. They have a chance to do that, but sometimes there are kind of policies of the type: yes, you'll have this role, but since you are possibly more junior in this role, you'll possibly have a salary cut, or even you'll have to pass probation again. What do you think of this?
I think that's nuts. Um, yeah, you're not surprised that I think that that's nuts. So this is why I really like criteria for a given position that has nothing to do with the years of experience. So we all know people with 20 years of experience who have the same year of experience 20 times. I bet you can name 3 or 4 of them, right? You, the people who do the same work all the time. And if the organization rewards them based on the number of years of experience, why would they ever bother to do anything different? So I really like outcomes as opposed to personal achievements, but I will take even personal achievements if it means that we actually reward people for the job that they do, not the level that they have or the number of years of experience. For me, it's all about how do we relate actions to the job. And if you think that you cannot promote somebody because they only have 5 years of experience, but they're doing the job of somebody with 10 years of experience, they should get the promotion. They should get the money. I will not bore you with how many times that happened.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I don't know enough about Europe. In the US, you should all be able to look at the various criteria and levels and the salary ranges for those levels. I think that you can do that in Europe also, but I'm not sure.
Not so clearly. There's
Of
some kind
course,
of
yeah.
privacy issue and difference between country and also local area about raises and levels. But I've seen some situation you described in our experience with teams. I remember a company in which the co-founder asked technical people and engineer to grow as a manager because they didn't feel real that an engineer could be an engineer all life. We took this engineer and made the workshop to clarify expectation and attitude, and there was engineer that want to be engineer all the life. And that's why an anti-pattern we see in also in another company in which it seems natural to grow as a manager. There's nothing more wrong to me. I really like also in your presentation that focus on outcome-based leadership, describing the leadership and the role based on what happens, what can you influence, what is the impact, and doing something instead of being something. This is very challenging for organization to describe in terms of output because they think in terms of willing, wishful thinking, also not outcome-based description of roles.
Yeah, I really like that. The doing, not the being.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very nice way to put it. Thank you, Marco. Yeah. Yeah.
And also how to map the code work and the product work on influence in entire company by the point of view or point of action of an engineer and not only a manager.
Yeah, I find that people who want to say engineers, right, technical for whatever we want to call them, for their entire lives, they still want to influence the product. They still want to influence how the team works, but they don't want a title of manager. and they don't want to do the management work. And that's totally fine. I think it's totally fine. A guy worked for me several years ago, many years ago, who really wanted to be a first line manager, only a first line manager. Why? Because we had small teams, so he could still write some code. He still had his fingers in the code, and he really liked that. And he really liked mentoring more junior engineers. So the way engineers in this organization really moved up, they worked for Doug. And when Doug was done with them, they were amazing. They were collaborative. They understood how to do code review. They understood how to write tests. They understood how their work affected everybody else's work. Everybody wanted to know, when was Doug going to be done with this engineer? Because they wanted him. And Doug never wanted to move up in the organization. The coding he did and the mentorship, that was what he lived for.
How kind of huge influence he had on the product.
Oh, huge, because he was not in it for himself. He was in it for how to create the environment. And this technical environment that he really wanted to create, that made an enormous difference. We stayed alive as a company for about 20 years longer than we should have, only because Doug created such great engineers. Our marketing stunk. So yeah. So without marketing, you can't really sell much. And if you don't have really good product people, you don't make good strategy. You don't make good decisions about the products and all that stuff. But he created an environment, a technical environment, as a first line manager that was second to none. It was really amazing. Thank you for reminding me of that. I got to write about that. Yeah, thank you.
I have another question. No.
Yeah.
Is you talk about the people, the career, but there is an important element of everyone that is the personality. No? Each one is different. I know this personality test, that Enneagram, this, Belvin, or whatever, that I have made with my teams. We are different. I'm really, really different, no? When you realize of that. So, how is the connection with this?
So I really like, I'm going to put this in the chat. I briefly looked for the ocean personality thing. I really like a diverse set of people with diversity of thought first, diversity of experience second, and diversity of personality third. So one of the problems in software is most of you are introverts. I am not. Yeah, I am an extrovert. And I have to really manage myself. This goes back to the best advice I ever got, which was to manage myself, and make sure that I do not make it impossible for the introverts to participate. So I have learned over time how to do that. And I also think that that introverts have a responsibility here to say, I'm thinking. I learned the I'm thinking from Esther Derby, right? When Esther and I wrote Behind Closed Doors, Secrets of Great Management, she would say to me, we pair wrote that book. She would say, I'm thinking. And then all she had to do was hold up the finger, the index finger, by the way, not a different finger, right? So she held up this finger and said, and then I would stop talking. That was my cue to stop talking. I did not finish my sentence, even if it killed me. I just stopped talking. And that was, I did not realize until she didn't how often I talked. And so we have a responsibility as humans who are collaborating with other humans that we need to explain what our API is, right? Manu, I'm pretty sure I said to you when we were organizing this, I'm pretty sure I said to you, even if you don't have the link, please send me a calendar invitation now, because I live and die by my calendar, right? My calendar is my API, right? We have a responsibility to other people to tell them our preferences. Then we have to collaborate to figure out how to work together. But the more introverts we have on a team, the more we have to talk to each other about how do we create an environment where we are not mind reading other people. And the more extroverts we have on a team, how do we create an environment where we are not yapping all the time, especially together? I happen to think that that's just fine. I suspect most of you introverts I would make crazy. And then the introversion and the extroversion is the very biggest piece that I see. Because otherwise, we can have collaborative approaches. So, for example, until Jerry Weinberg taught me the rule of three, I always took the very first answer I had, the very first solution. And I now know a useful approach is to develop three possible answers, three possible solutions to any given problem. Right? I might want more than that, but three is kind of my minimum. So if I start to think about the first solution, I have this ingrained now enough that I say, what are the other two, Johanna? Or ask for help if you cannot think about two more. So he didn't have to talk about people who go off and create 35 solutions. He just had to say to me, please make sure you're considering three. Right? That changed how I approach problem solving. And that's the kind of thing that if we get the introversion and extroversion kind of settled out, and we are agreeable enough and we are open enough, that's part of the personality traits. Agreeableness, I think, is the A, and open is, I think, the O. If we are open enough to new ideas and agreeable enough to collaborate with each other, we can figure out where to go from there. You're welcome.
Johanna, Janice, I just wanted to give one comment on the last topic that you mentioned about extroverts having a lot of words to share in comparison to introverts who have maybe less words to share. I had a funny situation going to a dentist, and I had to keep my mouth shut for a certain amount of time. It was the case that I'm not supposed to talk for somewhere between 1 and 2 hours. You cannot imagine what that caused me thinking. I had to keep my mouth shut for full 2 hours, and I could realize how many thoughts went through my brain in this amount of time. And I realized how much I'm talking. I didn't realize before that. I was thinking I'm a just normal talker. No, I'm a completely similar to what you're saying now. And this made me talk now again. Anyway, I realized how much I can talk less. And you cannot be more true of what you're saying, that diminishing yourself at certain point to let other people talk, how important is that? So it was a really cool example that I had recently, and it taught me a lot. So thank you.
Thank you. I actually write as an introvert, where I don't talk about when I'm writing. While I'm writing it, I have to write it down, and then I can talk about it. And I found that for me to learn how to manage my outbursts, my talking too much, I wrote down. And if you can write in longhand, right, with a pen on a piece of paper, that's even better for me than it was to sit on my hands or close my eyes. I realized I had a lot of interesting things going on in my head, but I didn't have a way to capture them. So I found that writing really changed that for me. Thank you for your story. I hope that you're all done with the dentist and everything worked out well. So Jean asked, is there a recommended frequency or indication when to revise a career ladder. I would say yearly at minimum. And the more you want an agile transformation, the more I think you need this early rather than later. So early on, remember, culture is what you can discuss, how we treat each other, and what we reward. And the rewards are so huge. Agile totally needs to change the reward system. So instead of being rewarded for your individual achievements, how do you influence the team? How do you reflect that in a career ladder? And I find that when I think that way, I am much more likely to be able to change the career ladder when I need to. But if you still have a yearly reward system, performance evaluations, do it then. Well, do it before you need it. Other questions, other comments. So, Katerina, if 16 personalities is Myers-Briggs, that's been debunked for a long time. So, I think if you use that to understand yourself, that's really helpful, but not so much to understand others. I find Ocean is more valuable for me, and it seems to be more based in science as opposed to, what's the word I want? Adoption. There. But maybe I'm wrong. I'll have to take a look at that.
Hi, no, thank you for your opinion. Thank you very much. Yeah, Jasmine, the conversation just remind me of this test, and I use it sometimes. And it's really true that it helps you to understand yourself. And for me, sometimes it also helped me to understand how maybe some other people think or why they're acting in a particular way. But I will definitely go to check the Ocean personality.
Yeah, and this looks like a lot of what I think about is Myers-Briggs. So yeah, which is not horrible. I used Myers-Briggs for a long time. I'll have to take a look at it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you too.
Yeah, Marco.
I
Yes.
made for myself a lot of personality tests, the Myers-Briggs, the Belbin, I don't remember, the DISC, the I1. I made all the available tests because I was thinking how HR teams and people using this test to choose people, the right people. And I learned what you just said. It's useful to knowing better yourself, your mechanism, your functionality. You can understand others by the test. So we suggested to let the people make for themselves the test and sharing what they learned about the test without sharing the test. Because there's a lot of tools also online that join the result from different people in a team to find if it's a good fit, a good alchemy. But this is not predictable. So we suggested to use the test only to give people information and not to share information about what they say in the test. That's my 2 cents about all my Myers-Briggs. I am an INTJ, Yana TJ, by the way.
Yeah, I find so every time I took the Myers-Briggs tests, I was an ENTJ, right? Which is unusual. Yeah. Yeah. Well, an E, not an I, right? So extrovert. Yeah.
Oh, yes, the contrary.
Yeah. Yeah. I am much more introverted in certain social situations than I am at work. So I know I used to love big parties, bigger the better. I was a social butterfly. I would move to all these places. I had animated conversations, and I don't like that anymore because I cannot differentiate the conversations because of my hearing disability, right? So I'm deaf in my right ear. That does not change the fact that I go to all these places, and I will again once we can fly, right? But it changes how I am in these social situations. At work, it's very, very different. As I'm still an extrovert at work, I still have to really watch what my lips say, right? I need to really be careful about how much I talk so that I don't take up all the space in the room. So I'm still extroverted, but I have preferences for social kinds of interactions that look very introverted, right? So I'm not going to take the 16 personalities, but if they ask me, would you prefer to have a party with 4 people or a party? Sorry, introverts probably only want 1 or 2 other people, right? So I even said 4. But if they said to me, do you want a party with 200 people or a dinner with 4 or 6? I would choose a dinner with 4 or 6, even though before I would have chosen the big party, because my social situation has changed given my physical abilities now. And my experience is that Myers-Briggs and these 16 personalities, if that's like Myers-Briggs, don't differentiate between them. And we are different people at work than we are at home. Right? And I want us to take advantage of everything we could be, as opposed to saying, which gets back to your point about using these tests for slotting people into different jobs. I think using any personality test to slot someone into a job is malpractice. It's wrong. It makes no sense and is demeaning to every single person.
Amen.
High five. Oh, I did not know that there was an engineering career ladder. I will have to take a look at that. Thank you, Jean. So what other questions do you have? What are their comments?
I'm reading this comment from Jeanne. Is there any career ladder that you have found as a good inspiration? Before maybe you ask this question, I have to share some work we've done with some teams solving that problem of the career ladder. And we simply made a timeline of change they experience in their career. So we had to found a career ladder that really helped in the organization. So to find the good and the bad in the existing change before formalizing a real career ladder. So that was very insightful for the people because they forgot what they experienced in the past, maybe.
Well, that's such a fascinating way to do it, Marco. Thank you. I find that I have gray hair, right? So my early career was very, very different than anybody else's early career, unless you are my contemporary. I started off as a software developer in 1977, and even by 85, when the PC was widely available, things had started to change. And by the 90s, the mid-90s, things had changed again. By the mid-O's, again, things have changed. And now we're not quite at the mid-20. Oh, I missed the teens there. Yeah. So every decade, things seem to change. And sometimes things change faster. I don't think it's a Gen Z or a millennial or anything like that. I think it's partly how do we see ourselves as technical people and how do our organizations see us? I think that's what's changed a lot over my career. Interesting.
I would like to share that I was working in a Swedish company, telecommunication company, the career for the engineer. And a friend of mine, he reached the maximum category, and he has an Audi card for the company that his manager doesn't have. He has a lot of privilege, not just the salary, that other manager at the same level that the manager here in Spain has in this Swedish company that I feel.
So there was parity between the technical work and the management work. Yeah. And you said that that was a Swedish company?
Yeah.
I'm not surprised. So if you look at the cultural, Gerd Hofstede has done a whole bunch of work around culture, and the Scandinavian countries have the least idea of positional authority. So the Scandinavian countries have the least power distance perception and the least, in effect, use for power distance, which is why, Israel is like that also. So if you look at organizations around the world who have adopted agile approaches and transformations faster, Israel and in Scandinavia, anybody with a significant power distance relationship, we are, and I include the US here, we are much slower to adopt agile transformations because agility changes the power distance, right? It shortens the distance between the powerful and the powerless. And in the US, while we call everybody by their first name, we have a huge thing about power distance. I don't know nearly enough about anywhere in Europe. So, Jean, if you are from Toronto, like I think you are, I think Canada has less of a power distance than the US because you are much nicer. Yeah, Alberto, I'm not surprised that power distance is a big problem anywhere in the continent, mostly because of how you guys started and all the colonial powers and all of the various history I barely understand. Right, Alberto, that totally makes sense there. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so true. You know. Yeah, because
Yeah.
here to even call someone by their first name, it's especially someone senior. Here, I can comfortably call you Johanna. It's normal. About 4 years ago, I had the opportunity of being in the US. So I attended a seminar or a workshop. So I was calling, and the way the reaction on her face is like, come on, what are you doing? Like, I said, sorry, I can barely call you your name, but I think she's like a professor, a doctor, somebody very senior, right? And here how we adore them, really, So when I said, I can't just call you that, that's my culture. Where I'm coming from, we can't really call people by their first name. And she rebuked me and said, no, if you want to continue this conversation, you have to call me by my first name. So I had no choice but to call.
Well, and I think you and I have had several email conversations, and I think I've said to you, please call me Johanna. Yeah, madam is for when I'm sitting in a restaurant and the waiter comes and asks me my order. What would you like, madam? Fine, right? They don't need to know my first name. But my colleagues, and I consider you a colleague, I think we wrap this up.
Thank you so much, Johanna. It was a pleasure, and thank you to all the people that attended. Have a good rest of the day.
Mhm.
Thank you all so much.